India is the land of spirituality and timeless traditions. This is the land of the Buddha, of the Dham and the Sangh, and one can experience Buddha anywhere and everywhere. From the famous Sanchi Stoop to freestanding pillars, from temples to monasteries, the breathtaking group of monuments at Sanchi were built from the 3rd century BCE to the 12th century CE. Every inch of the site, especially the 4 intricately carved torans, bring alive stories from the life of Gautam Buddha, his teachings, and the Jatak tales. The group of 109 caves and rock-cut monuments at Kanheri date from the 1st or 2nd century BCE to the 10th century CE. From chaityas, vihars and stoops, to sculptures and relief carvings, from paintings to inscriptions in multiple scripts, Kanheri in Mumbai is a wonder that is a testimony to the history of Buddhism in India. Sirpur or Shripur, as it was originally known, is an ancient archaeological site in Chhattisgarh, located on the banks of the Mahanadi. It is suffused with spirituality and tranquility, and is timeless evidence of the plurality of Indian culture. The large Buddhist vihars and the exquisite Buddhist sculptures that are even extolled in foreign travelogues are gateways to a surreal experience. Devni Mori is a picturesque Buddhist archaeological site in Gujarat that is dated between the 3rd and 4th century CE. The site has evidence of a monastery and is especially famous for its freestanding stoop. Inscribed caskets of relics were excavated from this ancient stoop, and numerous sandstone sculptures of the Buddha have been found at Devni Mori. The Ajanta and Ellora caves, located in Aurangabad district, were constructed over centuries. These two groups of cave monuments have witnessed the rise and fall of dynasties and attract pilgrims from across the world. In addition to chaityas, vihars, and exquisite sculptures, Ajanta is also home to mesmerizing and breathtaking paintings and murals that are universally recognized as one of the finest specimens of Indian and Buddhist art.
Yeah. Namaste and very good evening. Dear participants, greetings on the auspicious occasion of Buddha Purnima. I am very happy to be with you this evening, and on behalf of India Tourism Mumbai, the regional office of Ministry of Tourism, I thank you for joining us today on this special session on the Buddhist sites of Western region, which will be presented by Dr. Suraj Pandit, an accomplished historian and archaeologist. As we all know, India is deeply associated with almost 2,600 years of Buddhist heritage, and it has been attracting Buddhists living in different countries all over the world who have natural desire to visit the places related to life and teachings of Buddha, and those all over the world who want peace on the earth said must visit the Buddhist circuit. While the Mahanirvan sites in the uh, uh, Bihar and Uttar Pradesh are on the mainstream, and a lot of travelers come. But the western region, especially the states of Maharashtra, Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, and Chhattisgarh, as you see in the film a little while ago, have a huge uh, uh, heritage, Buddhist heritage, kind of located at various places. And in fact, as it said, the India is the land of spirituality. It is the land of Buddha. It is the land of Dhamma and Sangha. And in fact, when you travel to these places, you can experience the teaching of Buddha across the length and breadth of the country. And today, on this again, on the auspicious occasion of Buddha Purnima, we invite you to a journey to the Buddhist sites in Western India. And we all know, tourism also works in synergy. All components of tourism sectors have to work together to deliver a positive experience to traveler. Therefore, to ensure tourism sites in India, including Buddhist sites, get the place they deserve, the Ministry of Tourism has been continuously working to position India as a tourism destination, as a Buddhist tourism destination. And we in India Tourism Mumbai, responsible for the Western region, are just adding to the step by kind of promoting the Buddhist sites in the Western region. Let me briefly tell you about our presenter today. We are honored to have Dr. Pandit, who has graciously agreed to give us time to talk about the Buddhist sites in Western region. He is an eminent historian and archaeologist. He is also the chairman of the ad hoc board of studies of the ancient history, culture, and archaeology University of Mumbai, and he was member of various committees of University of Mumbai, such as Academic Council, Faculty of Arts, and he was awarded a PhD by the University of Mumbai on the topic religious development of Buddhism understood through the art of Kanheri under the guidance of Professor AP Jambedkar. So this is something, a great privilege that he is with us. In fact, if there are so many honors and laurels that he has to his credit, and he has also published several books. In fact, the India Tourism Mumbai was fortunate to be associated with him during the release of his book Mumbai Beyond Bombay, where he also did a special reading for us. Uh, with this, I now invite Dr. Pandit to take over the web space and take us through this journey of Buddhist heritage or Buddhist sites in Western region. Over to you, Mr. Suraj Pandit.
Thank you, sir. In the beginning, I would like to thank India Tourism Office, especially Director Sir Venkatesan Dattatreyan for giving me this opportunity to share my views. And I'm thankful to the entire team of India Tourism who has made this event possible. With your permission, sir, I would like to share the screen to start.
Please go ahead.
I'm glad today to share my views on Buddhist sites in Western region, especially with reference to tourism development and the special focus on Buddhist circuit. To the August gathering here, I can see many of my friends, colleagues, seniors, teachers who have joined us today. I'm grateful to all of them. Today, on the day of Vaishak Purnima, the auspicious day for all of us, I'm going to mainly focus not on the cultural or archaeological or historical aspects of these Buddhist sites, but primarily these sites, Buddhist sites, as the you can say the source or resource for the development of Buddhist tourist circuits. When we talk about Western region, I have primarily focused on Gujarat and Maharashtra because there are many Buddhist sites which are spread over these two states, amongst which Gujarat tourism has come up with some of the circuits and they have identified sites, but in Maharashtra, most of the sites are being neglected. And today what I'm going to talk about is how these sites can be used to create clusters, circuits, and to promote these two for the development of tourism in Western region. So these are the important sites which I have chosen to talk about. There are very few sites which I have chosen which were in the form of archaeological mounds, like I will say Devni Mori or Sopara or Pauni. Most of the sites are basically rock cut monuments which is obviously my first love. And there are two sites which I have identified, which are modern sites. One is Chaitya Bhumi, another is we can say Diksha Bhumi. I'll be talking about it in the due course. But this is the region which we'll be focusing upon. This is the Gujarat area, and this is the state of Maharashtra. Again, there are more than 1,200 caves in like rock cut monasteries, rock cut monuments, monoliths in India. I have not touched upon, like many of them, they lie in the Western India, especially in the Deccan. Obviously, I have not touched upon all the sites because it's a huge number to talk about. But I have chosen selected few sites which can be considered as you can say as a potential to develop Buddhist trails or Buddhist circuits within this. So to begin with, I will first talk about Gujarat, where we have very well defined circuit, especially the Junagadh circuit and Bhavnagar circuit, which can be called as Buddhist sites or Buddhist circuits. But before that, let me talk about something which is essential to begin with today. Today is Vaishakh Purnima, that is the day which is believed to be the day when Buddha was born. The Lord Buddha had achieved his enlightenment, and also he reached to the unconditioned state, that is Mahaparinirvana. So all the important events in the life of the Lord Buddha have believed to have taken place on the day of Vaishakh Purnima. So this is the day, the auspicious day for all of us. This is the cascade, relic cascade, which we have found in the excavations at Devni Muri. Now, why I'm starting with this? Because in the beginning, I pay homage to the Lord Buddha with this photograph, because this is believed to be the cascade containing the relics of the Lord Buddha. The inscription talks about the relics of Dashabali. Dashabali is one of the epithets of the Lord Buddha, as we all know. So we believe that this cascade, which was which carries an inscription and was kept in the stupa somewhere in the beginning of Common Era, somewhere in the third century or 4th century AD. So in the process of enlargement of the stupa, this stupa was opened and this cascade was kept inside the stupa at Devni Muri. So I begin with the site of Devni Muri. Unfortunately, today, the site of Devni Muri is sunken in under a water reservoir. So we cannot actually see, but this material, cultural material, which is collected from Devni Muri, is preserved, well preserved in the custody of Baroda University, who have conducted this excavation. There are some Roman sculptures, Roman statues also have been found, along with the Buddhist sculptures from Devni Muri. So Devni Muri was a site which was, you can say, a religious site, not far from Shamlaji, again, a Shaiva site. So it has its, the site has its own religious importance from Buddhist as well as for Shaiva, probably Pashupata Shaivas. But at the same time, it was a significant site from the trade, from commercial center. So we find a lot of cultural material related to that in the context of the Buddhist and Shaiva monasteries at Devni Muri and Shamraji. Not far from Devni Muri, we have this Vadnagar Buddhist monastery. Within the city of Vadnagar, there was an archaeological mound, and in the excavation where we have found these Buddhist remains. So these two sites, they form the the core from which we can begin, I can say, they belong to the early years of the common era. But obviously, these are not the oldest known sites from Gujarat. The oldest known sites from Gujarat come from this cluster of Buddhist sites, and most of them are rock cut sites. So this is Junagadh, and we all know about the rock edicts from Junagadh, rock edicts of King Ashoka the Maurya. So the antiquity of Junagadh archaeological remains go back to, at least back to Mauryan period, as we know. So 3rd, 4th century BC. And the famous Sudarshana Lake and everything has been discussed by so many people over the period of time. But when we talk about Junagadh, on the hill, there is a famous temple of Lord associated with Datta Sampradaya, also associated shrines there of the Shaivas. Apart from that, there are many rock cut monuments which you can see scattered over the hill in the region of Junagadh. So this is the Girnar edict, and we know that this is a set of 14 edicts dating back to the Mauryan period. King Ashoka has got engraved on this, and we have been talking about it for quite a long time. So this is one of the most important and most, you can say, it can be referred to as oldest antiquity related or associated with Buddhist culture, Buddhist tradition in Gujarat. These are the caves in the vicinity of Junagadh, as we see. Stylistically, these various caves can be dated back to 2nd century or 3rd century BC and up to, you can say, 4th, 5th century AD. So it has a span of around, I will say, at least 700 years. So when I'm talking about span of 700 years, it is basically the span in which these caves were created. Again, I'm not saying that for 700 years there were chisels and hammers working simultaneously, continuously in the region. Definitely not. But obviously, in phases, these caves have been done. And as I said, I'm not going to primarily focus on archaeological historical aspect of these caves or of these sites. I will not go into the details about the discussion of minute details of the chronological development of this site. But these are highly decorated. Some of these caves are highly decorated. Some of these caves are quite simple, but we know from the remains, from the structures which we study here, that there were many structural, many structures were in the context of these caves. If you observe on the top of, like, this is a complex, a small cave complex, but on the top of this, you can actually see there were many structures erected probably in the perishable material. So in the wood or in the brick, or probably sometimes in a stone also, because there are some fallen stone which also can be seen in the region. Definitely, initially there were controversies about these caves being Jain or Buddhist, but there are certain caves which we are sure about that these are Buddhist caves, which I am talking about. So this cave complex, basically what we call it as Sana complex, or which is a cluster of around 62 caves. It has a stupa in the Garbhagriha, and it is quite interesting cave. As we can see, this is divided into two parts. So many such, see, when we talk about rock cut architecture, it is primarily focused on Deccan. what we see is. But we need to know, we need to understand that there are rock-cut caves excavated in limestone, in laterite, in Gujarat also. In Deccan, primarily these caves are excavated in basalt. There is only one site which we talk about, one of like three sites rather we talk about. The site like Panay Kaji, or caves coming from Mahad area or coming from Goa, which are excavated in laterite. But most of the other sites are excavated in basalt in Maharashtra. So when we talk about the early caves of early Buddhist caves in Gujarat, this is one of the most significant group which we should know about, and which is a relatively small group of 15 caves. But actually, you can see a full-fledged developed Buddhist pantheon at this site in the same Junagadh tourist cluster, I will say. This is something I will say. These two are the Pratihara Bodhisattvas, as we see at Ajanta. I'll talking about Ajanta in a while. As we see at Ajanta, at the entrance of the main Garbhagruha in cave number 1, a properly preserved two bodhisattvas, Padmapani and Vajrapani, those who are Pratiharas, they are the guardians. Similarly, these two bodhisattvas can be seen here. And this is the site from where we get beautiful sculptures coming from, you can say, early Mahayana phase, maybe dating to, you can say, 5th century, 6th century AD. I will date this to 6th century, but there are some scholars who also think that this can be dated to 5th century AD. So I'm just proposing these views. I know this is not the platform to talk about controversies in the dating and other things. This is another interesting cave site, which is known as Siot. This is a group of 62 caves. See, again, like these are relatively bigger groups, but most of these caves which we see in these other sites, except the site which we have just I'm sorry for this. Except the site of Kambaleda, most of these sites, basically, these caves are quite simple. They are simple viharas and highly, you can say, eroded. There are very few caves which are in an ideal state of preservation, I will say. And obviously, the reason behind that is the rock in which these caves are excavated. Now, because of these conditions of the caves in which it has been preserved, it becomes really difficult to make out their actual original plans or their alterations which have been made in these caves. So when we talk about this cluster of 62 caves, these caves have really been neglected by the scholarly world from the study point of view. The focus has been on the caves of Maharashtra when we talk about Buddhist rock-cut monasteries, because they being more ornamented, they being aesthetically far better than these early caves. But scholars should focus on the study of this, which might help us in developing, like tapping more tourist attractions and more potential. This is an isolated site in Kutch called Kolvi, where we have a group of caves, which is again, you can say, an early group starting from somewhere around, I'll say, in the beginning of Common Era. But I can see from the material remains that it has continued over the period of time, even in the later period, in the fully developed Mahayana phase. So there are monolithic stupas and simple rock cut monasteries which can be seen. This is another site near you can say the Bhavnagar area where we have this group. See, I'm not primarily focusing on, like, I'm not talking more about these sites primarily because Gujarat Tourism has actually developed these circuits. And when you visit the website, they talk about the Buddhist circuits. Unfortunately, in case of Maharashtra, that has not been identified. When we talk about Buddhist circuits in Maharashtra, we primarily talk about Ajanta and Ellora and not beyond that. So, I'm just touching upon Gujarat, and I'll be more talking about Maharashtra after few slides. Why I'm like, this is another important site after Devni Mori, which is like Vallabhi is equally important site as we see, because Vallabhi is supposed to be the site which was known as the educational center in ancient India, which was visited by Yansang in his travel in 7th century AD. The Yansang, who was in search of Buddhism, to learn Buddhism, who had visited India, was a Chinese monk traveler, and he left his records behind in the form of his travelogue, that is records of the Western world. It is interesting to see that Vallabhi was on its, like, in the peak, that is somewhere around from 4th century to 7th, 8th century AD. We do get numerous archaeological remains coming from this site. And I specifically got this photograph of bronzes coming from Vallabhi. So the oral tradition, which is documented by Yansang and associated with Yansang, says that the founder of his monastery, which he belonged to in China, comes from Vallabhi. So he primarily relates himself to Vallabhi, and so he makes it a point in his travelogue that he had visited Vallabhi. There is another isolated site in the South Gujarat area. You can say not far from Baroda, the Kadaidunga, which is again a combination of structural and rock cut remains. So you can actually see on the top of this, you have remains of a stupa. So what we need to do when we talk about Buddhist sites, we have immense cultural material available with us. To some extent, Gujarat, the tourist circuits also have been defined. But we need to promote these tourist circuits by creating a set of documents, the authentic information, and also creating infrastructure for the promotion of these Buddhist sites. So these are the two aspects on which, if we pay attention, even in the state of Gujarat, I think it would be great if we will be able to promote a Buddhist cultural heritage, and we can actually properly design circuits and promote them to the international tourists. When we and as well as national, like our own Buddhist fraternity in India also. So these are some of the sites from Maharashtra which I'll be touching upon. Obviously, I have chosen at least minimum one photography from each of the sites. Obviously, there are many photographs I have taken from Ajanta, which I'll be talking about. But as I said in the beginning, the objective is to talk about tourist circuits and not about the Buddhist sites. So the first tourist circuit which I would like to talk about from Maharashtra is Mumbai. As many tourists, national or international, they land here, this being the economic capital and the capital of the country, or the capital of Maharashtra. We have a proper infrastructure to receive people. But what do we do after that? You know, so if we are to design Buddhist circuit around Mumbai, we have few sites within Mumbai, like within Mumbai metropolitan region, like the Sopara. So as I started with Devni Mori, when I was talking about Gujarat, and then started talking about Junagadh. In case of Maharashtra, I would like to start with Sopara, because Sopara is the site from where we have found a relic cascade, which is now in the possession of Asiatic Society of Mumbai, and also two fragments of edicts of Ashoka, the Maurya King Ashoka, which are in possession of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj Vastu Sangrahalaya. So, like here, I would like to say the museums which are associated with the Buddhist sites, like the Baroda University Museum or Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj Vastu Sangrahalaya. The visits to these museums is essential when we talk about Buddhist circuits and Buddhist sites, because the cultural material associated with these Buddhist sites is preserved in these museums. You know, so Sopara is one of the unique sites. And as we know, the archaeological remains, the earliest date of these archaeological remains go back to Mauryan period, but the oral tradition tells us that the monastery at Sopara, or the Buddhist literature, the canon. Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay. Canonical literature, Buddhist canonical literature tells us that the antiquity of Sopara, the antiquity of monastery at Sopara goes back to pre-Mauryan period. But I will not talk about it, as this is not the platform to discuss the antiquity of monastery at Sopara. But on the safer side, I will just state that at least it goes back to Mauryan period. Another site, that is this site, one single photograph I have just chosen, and that is the Chaitya cave at Kanheri cave number 3. Why I have chosen this particular photograph? There would have been better photographs, aerial photographs, and other things of Kanheri. But I just because this is the site which was like it was occupied by the monks till I'll say 15th century AD or 16th century AD. So this is the site which was under occupation for more than 1300 years. And Buddhist monastery, this was a significant religious center in the South Asia, as we know from the Tibetan and Nepalese literature and the Japanese literature, which give reference to the site of Krishnagiri Mahavihar. There is another important site in Mumbai, and that is Mahakali, which is in the south of Kanheri. So these are the old ancient sites which are associated with Buddhism, Buddhist sites, which can form the core of the Buddhist trail. And then we have these two relatively modern sites, I will say. One is Chaitya Bhumi and other is the Global Pagoda. Why are these two sites important? Because Chaitya Bhumi is a memorial created in the memory of Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar, who was responsible, who was instrumental in the social reform. And Buddhism was used as a tool by him to bring in the social reform along with education. So this becomes a pilgrim center in a modern, like in the 20th century. And parallel to that, we have this Global Vipassana Pagoda, which is at Gurai, where actually the bodily remains of the Lord Buddha have been installed in the pagoda. So many pious believers make it point to visit the pagoda and pay their homage to this pagoda. So this can form a Mumbai circuit for Buddhists, and this may be for 2 or 3 days we can talk about. Then there is another site, another cluster we can talk about is Nasik, where we have Pandavlena group of Buddhist caves, which is one of the important sites from the history of Maharashtra, history of Buddhism. Apart from that, we have Igatpuri Vipassana Center, International Center at Igatpuri. So these are the 2 important sites which we can focus on when we talk about Nasik. But on the periphery, like as Nasik have Pandavlena, and on the periphery we have Igatpuri in the on one side. On the other side of the Nasik, in the south of it, we have Junnar. So Junnar has more than like 150, around 200 caves, rock-cut monasteries divided into 7 different groups, as we know from Junnar. And these are quite important from the point of view of understanding Buddhism in the early period, which was flourishing in Deccan region. So these 3 sites, Nasik, Pandavlena, Igatpuri Global like International Center for Vipassana, and Junnar. Junnar is considered as one of the largest cluster of Buddhist sites in Maharashtra. So these are the 3 important sites fall in this particular area, circuit. Then there is another circuit we'd like to talk about is Lonavala, Pune area, where we have 3 major and 2 minor sites, where we have Karla, Bhaja, and Bedse, which are quite significant and very popular sites. Bhaja is the earliest known site. It is supposed to be the earliest rock-cut monastery in Western India, dating back to 2nd century BC in Maharashtra. Then this is Karla, which is supposed to be the most beautiful Chaitya in Jambudvipa, as the donor he himself says that Jambudvipa Sauttamam. That is the phrase which he has used. And like when we look at the Chaitya, we realize that this is actually the best Chaitya of its time ever created. Aesthetically, it's beautiful. There is 3rd group of caves, and that is Bedsa in the same area. So on the same hill, on one side we have Bhaja, and on the other side we have Bedsa, and they are on the trade route. From Bedsa, the trade route goes down to the Kundalika Valley, which I'll be talking about in a while. But these are the 3 important caves. Apart from that, there are 2 minor sites, the Shilarwadi caves as well as the Bhandara caves at Dehu. So these 5 sites, they primarily form a cluster which can be promoted as a Lonavala Pune cluster. I know there are some other sites also, minor sites also, coming from Pune city itself or from the Pune city periphery itself. But as they are not so well preserved, I have not included those in this cluster. And again, I'm just giving the broader outline for how can we create Buddhist cluster in the area. Then I'm suggesting that there is a cluster which can be promoted from Konkan, that is the Raigad district cluster. From Bedsa, we come down to Kundalika Valley, and in the Kundalika Valley, we have the Kuda caves, which is again a very significant group of caves dating back to 2nd, 3rd century AD, probably occupied in the later period as well. At least the evidence says that at least till 6th, 7th century AD monastery was functioning. And in the north and in the south of Kundalika river, we have Thanale and Khadsamle, and on the other side in the south, like in the north, we have Thanale and Khadsamle, In the south of Kundalika, we have Gandharpali and Kod. These are the Buddhist sites, Buddhist clusters, which are unique. And now, again, like there is one more element which we need to understand. Like when we talk about Buddhist cave architecture, Buddhist rock cut architecture in Maharashtra, it cannot be only the pleasure trip. You know, one has to be prepared to climb, to trek, you know, to walk for hours, you know. So when we talk about Thanale Khadsamle, it has a wonderful scenic trek leading to the group of caves at Thanale or Khadsamle. And Gandharpale is relatively better. It is easy to access because it is next to the highway, actually. So this can be promoted as one of the clusters. So this is Gandharpale, which is facing to the Savitri, like the entire group is facing to the Savitri river. This is Kuda, which is facing to the creek of Mandad, which is also mentioned in Periplus of the Erythraean Sea, the book which was written in the early years of the Common Era to guide Roman traders to come here. So this is also a unique site and it needs to be promoted properly. Then Thanale and Khadsamle, these are the two sites which are again unique, and the excavations at Thanale, which was conducted by Archaeological Survey of India under the leadership of Dr. M.N. Deshpande, reveals various antiquities coming from the early period, dating even back to 2nd century BC. On the safer side, like some scholars try to push it back to 3rd century BC also. I'm just taking a safe stand. There is one more circuit which we can talk about, and that is South Konkan and South Maharashtra, where we have again in South Konkan we have Khed and Panhale Kaji. There is one single group in you can say carved in laterite at Panhale Kaji, and couple of isolated caves at Khed within the city of Khed. So which is not far from each other. So this is one cluster, and there is a pass connecting these sites with the Karad area. So the entire cluster of caves at Karad, which we have like Agashiv or Bhairav group of Buddhist caves, or Zakhidwadi group of Buddhist caves on the other side. Again, these caves are quite interesting. When we talk about Panhale Kaji, the caves somewhere begin around 2nd, 3rd century AD, and they continue even in the later Mahayana phase. Then after fall of Buddhism, Natha Sampradaya, like Hindu traditions, take over the site, and gradually at the end of 13th, 14th century, you can see Natha Sampradaya has taken over the entire site. So in various ways, these sites are unique, and Nathas and Buddhists, they have a very close connection with each other. As we know that in the list of Siddhas of Buddhists and Nathas, there are many common names can be seen. So this site gives us glimpses in the later history of Buddhism. So from that point also, these sites are quite important, quite significant, and along with you can say Karad group of caves, we have Pohare Buddhist caves near Kolhapur. So this can be found as one cluster. So I'm sorry, the Gandharpali has come again here. But these are Zakhindwadi, and this is Pohare. These are Zakhindwadi and Agashiv caves from Karad. When we talk about Vidarbha, there are three important sites which I would like to talk about. One is Pauni, or rather 4 important sites, 3 sites and a museum. One is Pauni, other is Mansar, third is Diksha Bhumi in the Nagpur, and fourth is Central Museum, Nagpur. So many of the architectural remains from Pauni are kept in National Museum or in Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj Vastu Sangrahalaya, Mumbai. There is a small mound which even today, a very disturbed mound which we can see today, which is covered with vegetation and being like the area around that is being tilted for agricultural activities. But the Mansar Mound is like, there are numerous mounds at the Mansar again. One of it is identified as the Buddhist mound, and the remains which are excavated are identified as the remains of stupa from Mansar. Mansar again is associated with Vakatakas as their capital, and it has its own place in the history of Maharashtra of the early period. The Diksha Bhumi is the place where Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar you can say embraced Buddhism, and then so this is Jagoda cluster, which I would like at the end of the known Ajanta and Ellora, these sites, as I said. This cultural panel is, I'll say, this comes from Buddhist caves of Aurangabad. Aurangabad, we have two different groups of sites just behind the hill, behind the monument of Bibika Maqbara on the same hill. And it has both the phases, early Buddhist phase as well as Mahayana Buddhist phase. And this beautiful sculpture of a sculptural panel of a dancer comes from the sanctum of a Mahayana Buddhist cave. So again, there are beautiful sculptures coming from 5th, 6th century AD in this particular complex. Parallel to Ajanta, you can say this is the cave at Ghatotkaч. You can see the architectural parallels as well as the style, the sculptural style is the continuation of that over here. But the most interesting site in the region after Ajanta and Ellora is Pitalkhora. This group of caves is again an isolated site, and it's in a very scenic context. So a major excavation was conducted at this particular site, report of which was published in Ancient India as one of the articles by Dr. M.N. Deshpande. And culturally, I will say this is a unique site. This site begins somewhere in the 2nd century BC and continues at least till 6th, 7th century AD as a monastic site. We do not know what has happened after that, but the material culture suggests that this continued up to 6th, 7th century AD, and there are beautiful paintings of 6th century AD, late 5th, early 6th century AD at this particular site. The stupa in the main Chaitya was, the foundation of which was, you can say, was a monolithic. The upper part of the stupa was the structural one. So we have found in the excavation some relic caskets from the stupa from this particular site. Apart from that, two important sites, obviously we need to talk about, and that is Ajanta and Ellora. Ajanta, as we know, Professor Spink has talked about it. It falls in the second half of 5th century AD. Again, I will not go into the controversies about the date and blah, 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 blah. But this is a World Heritage Site and worth visiting. It's a group of 31 caves where we have early Buddhist chaityas like cave number 9 and 10, and later Buddhist chaityas like cave number 19 and 26 and 29. And beautiful Mahayana monasteries like cave number 1, 2, 4, 16, 17, and so on. 21 and 23 as well. Primarily, cave number 1, 2, and 16, 17 are known for the beautiful paintings. These are the paintings coming from the early phase of the Buddhist caves. So usually Ajanta is remembered for the Mahayana Buddhist painting, but these are the early Buddhist paintings coming from cave number 9, 10. The mainly chaityas, and they are part of the narrative paintings, basically narrating the Jataka tales. This is cave number 10, and this is the famous panel of Mahaparinirvana coming from cave number 26. So basically, we see the journey at Ajanta from cave number 10 to cave number 26. And that is how we can put it in a nutshell about the development of Ajanta. This is how cave number 1, and this is what I was talking about, these two pratiharas at the entrance of the cave, Padmapani and Vajrapani. Cave number 19 and cave number 26 at Ajanta. So this is cave number 19 and this is cave number 26. You can see the journey of early chaityas evolving into this kind of highly ornamented and decorated chaityas. These kinds of painted panels can be seen, which are not based on Jatakas or Avadanas. These are from the various, you can say, stories related to the life of the Lord Buddha. So this is the panel depicting Mahapratihārya, which is the miracle which Lord Buddha had performed at Shravasti, believed to have performed at Shravasti. And these kinds of panels play a vital role in the Mahayana Buddhism from the ritual point of view, from the development of religio-philosophical traditions point of view. These are Jatakas, as we all know. This is another view of these Pratiharas. These are medallions and you can say decorative panels on the ceiling. So when we look at Ajanta, there is a variety in the topics which they have chosen. So there are geometrical patterns, there are mythical animals, and like various kinds of ornaments and human figures, etc., etc. On one hand, and on the other hand, we have Jatakas, Avadanas, and life stories of the Lord Buddha. So when we talk about Jatakas, there are various literary traditions which they have used, as we know from the inscriptions. So Ajanta gives us all the both glimpses of Theravada, early as well as the later Buddhist traditions. When we talk about Ellora, this is one of the most important caves at Ellora cave number 5. There are only two of these kinds cave. We have monasteries. We have one is this, and another is at Kaneri cave number 11. This is basically to accommodate changing rituals. They have changed the architectural pattern, because architecture being the ritual space, the new rituals were accommodated in the evolved Buddhist tradition. So what we see at Ellora is the completely evolved Buddhist pantheon and the last phase of the development of Buddhism in Western India. So Ellora, Kaneri, Panai, Kaji, these are the phases, these are the sites, or Mahakali, these are the sites which talk about the development of Mahayana Buddhism or Buddhist Tantra at one point of time. So this is Vishwakarma, that is cave number 10 at Ellora. And you can see now, like in the beginning, there was a simple stupa. At Ajanta, we have image installed on the stupa. And now here at Ellora, image has completely covered the stupa. Now, this is another interesting cave called Tintal, which is, I'll say, which is a unique Buddhist architectural monastic experiment which they have done. So Dontal, Tintal, these caves, they are unique because they are multi-storied, they are completely monolithic, and they talk about totally different type of Buddhism, a totally different kind of Buddhism, which is primarily based on Buddhist Tantra. So, like when we talk about Pune, Nasik area or Konkan area, we like Mumbai area, we are talking about the early Buddhism. When we are talking about Ajanta, Ellora, we are talking about primarily of Mahayana or Tantra, Buddhist Tantra. You know, so but when we talk about these sites, when we design circuits, we should design it in such a way that there has to be a story to narrate from early to the to later phase. And usually when people visit Ellora, the primary focus is on Kailash, and if time permits, they visit some of the Buddhist caves, you know. But I think these Buddhist caves have their own story to narrate. And so their unique, significant position in the history of Buddhism of Deccan has to be emphasized by us. So we need to create a database. We need to create the document which has a reliable, authentic information to promote these Buddhist sites. So I thank you all for the patient listening. I thank India Tourism for giving me this opportunity to share my views on how Buddhist clusters can be developed, tourism clusters can be developed in Maharashtra. I know there is a long way to go. There is a lot of work has to be done, but here I stop because that I think the time is over, which was given to me. So I thank you all. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Uh, thank you so much, Dr. Suraj Pandit. It was really a great journey for us, especially when we are tourism administrators and planners. Like it was well presented information, especially on Gujarat and Maharashtra. While the main centers do have the information and attention, but we really were thrilled to hear that there is so much of information which is hidden and really not known. And what you said is creating an authentic database. That was something which is quite a big takeaway for me. Hopefully, like, we will sit together at some point and see how this database can be done, and it can be presented properly to the authorities, at some point, where the Buddhist heritage of this region could be promoted for those seeking uh, the knowledge and also experiencing Buddhism in this region. There is, as you said, there is a great potential which lies and which, if properly documented and presented in the coming times, would be will help promote tourism in this. And we'll also have to look at the connectivity to these places. I'm not sure how well some of the caves and others. You said that, of course, it involves a lot of trekking and climbing, etc. But beyond that, if they are well connected, also that is another aspect they will look. And for me, on a personal level, uh, from this, it's been really an eye opener, and we will sit together. We have been talking about on a separate line to see how we can document and have a authentic information on this. Maybe it may take 6 months, but then it should be a well researched and well done work. I really thank you. And in case any of our participants, I also want to personally thank every participant who are here. In fact, it was one of the well attended and most uh, what do you call attentive audience that we have seen, and it is, I really thank all of them to stay and kind of get enriched by the knowledge that has been shared by Dr. Sumit Pandit. And in case, Doctor, if you are okay to take some questions, we have allowed our audience to unmute, and maybe we can take few questions if you have time.
Please, sir, please.
Yeah.
Please.
So I would request the audience, in case they have any questions, to just come forward. All of you are unmuted. You can put your questions directly to our uh, speaker today.
Sir, may I?
Please go ahead.
Sir, just wanted to confirm that the Vajrapani and the Padmapani are the protectors of Lord Buddha.
I have used the word pratihara, a guardian of the monastery. They're not supposed to be the protectors. See, as in temples, we have dwarapalas. They are not the watchmen, they are pratiharas. So similarly, they come as pratiharas. They are not protectors of the Lord Buddha, because Lord Buddha doesn't need protection. He is Lord Buddha.
Noted it, sir. Thank you.
Anyone else would like to ask any questions? Neela ma'am, are you there? Well, doctor, I think we don't have any questions coming.
Hello. I'm there.
Yeah, ma'am, I would like to acknowledge your presence. We have Mrs. Neela Lad, the former regional director of India Tourism. In fact, she has been quite active and encouraging us being part of our, and she knows you quite properly. Ma'am, you would like to say some words?
Of course, Venkat, thank you so much. Sir, you have been a great help to my office and Ministry of Tourism. You have been teaching most of these guide training programs, and I'm sure most of them are already there attending your lecture even today. That shows that any number of times we listen to you, it's always like listening to you afresh. Sir, it was great listening to you, and we look forward to more. In fact, there are a few suggestions which we have made to the regional director, that if we can have an independent session from you on Ajanta and Ellora alone, that would be really great, sir.
Any time, that is my pleasure to talk about Ajanta and Ellora. And let me express my gratitude, and I'm thankful to you for involving me in the work of India tourism. Whatever like small contribution I can give, that is I consider as my honor. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Our training program is complete without you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, Mr.
Can
Amod.
I
Yeah,
Yes,
please.
sir.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Amod.
Hello, Dr. Pandit. I don't think you know me, but I've seen you a couple of times. I'm from Aurangabad, and I would just like you to, if it is possible for you to draw a line on a map, connecting these caves to the trade routes. There were ancient trade routes, and there were many minor and major trade routes. So, if we could just draw a sort of line connecting some of the relatively unknown places. I'm not talking about Ajanta, Ellora, and all those places because those are all documented well there, and there is access to that also. So that we could look at the theme of following the Buddhist path. This could be a theme. Every tourism needs a bit of a theme, and so theme could be following the Buddhist path. And so when you're talking about following Buddhist path, there would be probably all these monuments that you mentioned and many more would be on a sort of minor or major trade routes. And so if you could just feel that, do you feel that it is worthwhile trying to explore that possibility?
Thank you, Amod, for bringing this point in. As I have not touched upon the cultural context, archaeological significance, and historical importance of these sites, I have not talked about trade routes. Again, the sites which I have chosen today for the presentation, these are the sites which have proper better infrastructure and the connectivity. See, for tourism development or promotion, we need to have at least a proper connectivity. You cannot identify isolated sites where we have a couple of caves or a couple of monastic sites remains to bring it on the tourist map. Obviously, those have to be documented, those have to be preserved, and gradually over the period we have to work on how those sites can be brought on the larger map of tourism development kind of thing. But this platform is not to discuss about documentation, So I have not talked about these minor sites, but it is a really good point which you have raised. And I think from this point also, we need to put in a lot of efforts to identify sites, to document them, and to understand their cultural significance. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Fine. I think with this, yeah, please go ahead.
Hello, sir. Actually, there is so much of positive feedback on our chat that we have missed some questions on the chat box.
Okay.
So one of the question is from Mr. Anand, and he's asking that how many days should one dedicate to see Ajanta and Ellora caves?
See, it depends on the interest which you have, because there is a person I know who has spent 65 years of his life to understand Ajanta, Professor Walter Spink. But at least as a tourist, if you have to see all the caves properly at Ajanta and then Ellora, I think Ajanta and Ellora together, we need at least 3 to 4 days to spend, like at least 2 days Ajanta and 2 days at Ellora. That is what I feel. But it depends on interest which each of the person has, and also the resources available. I might have wish to spend a week at Ajanta, but might not be possible for me. But ideally, if I say at least as a layman, to understand, to appreciate beauty, I should spend at least 2 days at Ajanta and 2 days at Ellora.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you again, Dr. Pandit. In fact, I would also like to acknowledge my team there, Malti, Swati, and Chandar, and also Vaishnavi was assisting us and managing this room, and also Garima ji from Cultural Sambad, who helped us to conceptualize the film that we saw in the beginning. And so it was a right fitting. I think it was a fitting tribute for the Buddha Purnima also. And with this, I would also wish everybody once again, uh, let the blessings of Buddha be there and let the industry come back soon and the normalcy begin. And as you said, we can really look at new products and new uh, sites. And also, this knowledge series will continue. So we will be kind of engaging with experts continuously, and we look forward to all the support. Once again, thank you, everybody. And with this, we close for the evening. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.